Welcome and hello. This is a support video for HEC ResSim. I'm titling this Starting Reservoir Elevation. So one of my viewers had a question, sent me in their files, and I'm going to open those files and give my recommendations. All right, so here is the watershed setup. I need to import or open up the network. So give me just a moment here. There it is. Click on open. Here is the reservoir system. So we have a single river, it appears, a single reservoir, and then a couple downstream diversions. It appears we have some inflow at the top junction, as well as a downstream control rule I'm seeing at the very bottom junction, junction 5. Starting reservoir elevation, the first thing that I saw in the most glaring error is the look back data, specifically the alternative data. Let me go ahead and open up the alternative. Click on look back, and we have this starting dam pool elevation. It's constant at 1614. This project is using metric units, so this number right here is in meters, but just keep that number in mind, 1614. And then I also noticed that our two diversions also need initial values for the look back. That's not quite as critical as what I'm about to describe here. So 1614. Let's go ahead and open up the reservoir properties. So right click, edit reservoir properties. And then if you click on pool here, and in the physical tab, click on pool. The lowest elevation we have here is 1642. So the starting elevation is below the lowest elevation we have data for the geometry of the reservoir. So that's going to be a problem. So the first thing I would do is to recommend is to increase that starting elevation value in the alternative, specifically the look back tab for your starting reservoir elevation. There's a few other things I wanted to point out in this support video. So here is the reservoir geometry. It goes from 1642 all the way up to 1768. So that's about 120, 130 meters. That's fine. I'm not going to check that data. We have some evaporation data associated with the pool. It looks fine. However, with the dam, if you click on the dam here, there's no outlet structures. So I would also recommend adding an outlet structure. You just go right click, a controlled outlet, add an uncontrolled outlet. You can put those into a group or make them independent. The power plant, which is really just a controlled outlet with some different power functions involved. Those are the main ones right there. In fact, if you go ahead and check out my exercise 2, I'll leave a link to exercise 2 where I talk about downstream control rules. By all means, work through that exercise from the beginning to the end. After that, you'll have a good handle on what I think you were trying to do here in this ResSim model. Because if I click on Operations tab, I see this one rule right here, and it looks like it's a downstream control rule looking at junction 5. This looks a little incomplete though, because it's basically saying there is a minimum flow at junction 5 all year round of 0 cubic meters per second. So I'm not really sure what this number was supposed to be. It just looks a little bit odd. And this rule only applies to the conservation zone, which has a top zone value of 1765. The flood control zone has a top of 1768. So that's only 3 meters difference. That's fine. And the top of the inactive zone is 1686. So with that starting reservoir elevation, we'd be below the entire geometry of the reservoir, but it'd have to be larger than 1686 if we even wanted to be in the conservation zone at all. So that's all I had for my review of this model in ResSim. Check out that exercise 2. I'll leave a link to in the description if you wanted to see an example of a downstream control rule. Otherwise, I looked at all the other data. It looked pretty good. We had some solid inflow data and diversion data. It's on a monthly time step. If you wanted to set the initial diversion data, you could type in 9.713 cubic meters per second in the alternative by going to look back, then typing that in here, and then same for the other diversion. But yeah, the number one thing I would say is increase this starting elevation for your reservoir, as well as add an outlet structure to the reservoir by clicking on physical tab and then click on the dam, right click, adding a controlled outlet or an uncontrolled outlet, and then defining the properties.